Welcome to the Science for Sport podcast, where we dive into stories and insights that drive peak performance. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind the science of success. Here's your host, Richard Graves.
Hello and welcome to the Science for Sport podcast with me, Richard Graves. This week, I'm looking into mindset and the importance of psychology when facing adversity and overcoming physical challenges. My guest this week started out life as a youth footballer, but was involved in two accidents that led to paralysis and brain damage. What was his mindset in facing down that adversity? How did he tackle those challenges? And how does it now influence the work he does today as a performance coach? Dan Metcalfe is my guest on this week's edition of the Science for Sport podcast, and we can hear from him now.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Dan, it's great that you've been able to join us on this week's podcast. Welcome along.
Thanks so much, Richard. It's an honour to be here with you.
I'm not sure whether it's so much an honour to be with me as it is to have you, having read your backstory, because I've found it fascinating. Talk about diverse and overcoming challenges along the way to developing a mindset which seems to place an emphasis on positive mental attitude and developing potential. You've done everything from appear in a West End musical to be the head coach in the US Olympic Development Program, to now being a keynote speaker and reinventing yourself as a performance coach. For people who aren't aware of your backstory, try and fill in the gaps for us and bring us up to speed with where we are right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's one of those situations where our path that we're going to go on in life, we never know what it's really going to be. But as long as we commit 100% to where we are, the best will continue to open it up. I have a saying, everything that happens is a gift if we wrap it correctly. So I've been a youth footballer back in England. I was at Crystal Palace Youth Academy and then went to Bournemouth when Harry Redknapp was there. And very quickly realised the football game wasn't for me. In those days, it was a lot of drinking and partying, and I was still at school doing A-levels. And so I didn't really fit in. And the professional game wasn't what it is today with the discipline. And I would have done much better today because people are serious about the profession rather than I've made it and now I can party. So I decided to leave the football game. And before I knew it, someone had told me I was going to go into the Royal Marines because I had done 8 years with the CCF. And I started doing aerobics to get supple for mountain climbing because I want to go to the Special Forces. And the teacher said, you should become a dancer. I'm like, a dancer? Why am I going to become a dancer? I'm a man's man, shaved head, running with backpacks down Bournemouth Beach. And very quickly, I got offered a full 3-year scholarship to go to Lane Theatre Arts in Epsom. And I found out I could sing, I could act, and then I ended up playing the lead in Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber shows. Well, I opened a show for him called Starlight Express in Las Vegas. And during the show, there was an accident on stage. I fractured my spine, I was paralyzed, and the doctor said that I'd be disabled for life. So that was really the first cognitive challenge of mindset that really had to challenge me. Who am I and what do I really want? But I'd had a great mindset before that because anything that came along, I'm going to take. And very quickly, I switched back to football because I couldn't be on stage while I was going through my paralysis recovery. And
Can I just interrupt there? Because you talk about paralysis recovery. It stands to reason that the moment somebody gets the news that you're paralyzed, that sounds quite definitive. That must have come as a shock. What were your emotions, and how do you go from that to thinking in terms of recovery?
Yeah, it was actually, I had another gift given to me at the same time, which was I lost sight in my right eye. I went blind in my right eye. And I was more concerned about being blind than I was about the physical aspect. Because when you got two options, the thought of losing my sight permanently and going to sleep that night, not wanting to sleep because you didn't know whether you'd wake up blind or what the situation would be, that became my focus. And fortunately, it was just from the accident getting hit on the head against a brick wall, the swelling in the brain around the optical nerve had caused it to shut down. But as the swelling went down, the sight came back. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to overcome this. We got to be very careful. And if we go into the sports psychology, right here, we know performance is 80 to 90% mental, but all of us are in the game of life. And yet we spend so little time developing our mental side. We're so busy getting the stronger body, the faster body, the better technical touch, the ability to read the game, but we don't look at our mental health the same way as we looked at our physical health. And that's really the eye-opener for me. And very quickly going back into football, coaching from a chair to begin with, I became a head coach on the Olympic development program for Nevada and then got transferred to California and the west of America. And using the mindset training, I was able to put more than 40 players into the professional game and more than 400 players looking at the physical training, because I had my own club. But at the same time, what are we doing with the talent and how do we overachieve? Because society tends to limit us on what achievement should be. So overachievement is actually real achievement that we're all born with the potential to have.
How did you overcome the paralysis diagnosis? Because we've spoken briefly about having the mental mindset to take on a challenge like that. However, from a physical standpoint, was it something where you were told there was a chance you could work on it? Were you given fairly negative news? How did you approach it?
Yeah, look, it comes down to money. At the end of the day, it was cheaper to disable me than it was to fix me. That's just the reality of the life that I was living in. And so their approach was, this is the way it's going to be. Now, this is, well, I love this conversation now because we go into the power of the brain. Our heart is our life force. It gives us life because of the oxygen and the blood flow and everything there. But our brain is our power force. But it can only be activated with the information it's given. So when we believe what someone's diagnosed us as, the brain will react unless we turn around and say, I don't accept what you're saying. There's more to it. I'm willing to go and do the work. I got a great story actually of a professional footballer, David Manoyan, who plays for the Armenian national team. At 19, he had his first knee operation. He had 6 operations. They said that he'd never play again. His career was over. He came to Los Angeles. I trained him for 3 months and he went back and played on the national team and continued to have 9 more years as a professional because we addressed the problem rather than limiting the information. And when we walk through it, and everybody knows, when you begin to feel success, you're willing to invest. When the prognosis goes from dire to possible, we change our whole physiological and neurological energy. And so, yeah, it took me a long time, Richard, to come back. 6 months just learning how to put a nut on a screw again and to do it up and trying to get that fine dexterity. But the one thing I had was I did not believe those that didn't believe in my potential. And that's why I believe we're all born superhuman. It's just what do we do with it? And if we take out the information of a computer, the computer doesn't work. And our brain is the most dynamic technology in the whole world. It will never be fully understood. And if we give it the power, it will heal.
Out of interest, how did the medical experts react? The ones that have said you were paralyzed, this was a state you were going to have to live with? Because I imagine they don't often come across individuals that are so hell-bent with such a positive attitude that they are going to push the limits. I would imagine they're coming across even fewer that actually manage to confound the diagnosis as well.
Yeah, they actually tried, again, as part of this system, and if I go into it, it's kind of fascinating, but in Vegas, I was working at Las Vegas Hilton, the lawyers represent the hotels, and so again, they wanted to basically dismiss me. And when I fought back, I became a difficult patient. I wasn't just going with the system. And they tried to put me through everything, psychological analysis, trying to prove that I was crazy, that I wouldn't follow what they were telling me. So I did everything they told me to do, but I would do it with a power and a passion rather than a resignation of, okay, well, this is the best I can do. And so again, I became a problem patient. And when I turned that around, they disappeared. I actually had to go and get my own lawyers, attorneys I never sued them. That wasn't my purpose. My purpose was my life. And so all I wanted was the right to see my own doctors. And I found people that would support my vision and not limit my vision to suit their, outlook or what they were being paid to do. And that's not conspiracy theory. This isn't like, oh, they're not bad people. They're just in a system where I was going to become a number or a statistic, and I refused to be that.
The remarkable thing, of course, is that you did find a way to overcome the diagnosis and regain movement in your lower extremities, only to then suffer another setback in 2018.
Yeah, this was fantastic. So after coming back from, the accident that I had on stage and then becoming Nike Youth Coach of the Year over here in California and training so many people, it was a fascinating time. I don't know if you know this as well, but I became the Hollywood's expert to the stars. I have more soccer movies that I've created than even working with Channing Tatum and Will Ferrell and all this different stuff, all these soccer movies. So my life was flying. And I've gone back and I started racing the Ironman, which was great to go from being paralyzed and told you'd be disabled to racing, not completing, but racing the Ironman was brilliant. Found out I was really good on the bike. That was my strength. So I started getting into racing teams. And I was out on a training ride. It was actually a recovery ride that morning. I'm like, am I even going to wear my helmet? Do I need to wear my helmet? It's an easy ride. But I decided to put it on at the last minute. Coming back into a guard-gated community, the guard brought the metal gate down on my head. I was going about 22 miles an hour on the bike. Immediately knocked unconscious. I got the video of it, and I only know this because of the security cameras. I'm frozen in the air, flying through the air. I hit the ground so hard, I break my coccyx. The back of my head hit the ground so hard, already unconscious, so secondary impact on the cerebellum. It broke my helmet open. Then the bike came down and hit me on the face. And I'm unconscious for almost 3 minutes. And during that time, that impact, part of my brain died. I had to learn to talk again properly. I had to learn to function. I had to train my brain to stay awake because I would just freeze mid-sentence for an indeterminate time frame. I had to obviously then face depression, PTSD, the inability to function. And I put on a ton of weight through depression and inability to move, which was the complete opposite of my life. So that was another gift that was given to me. And again, I go back, everything is a gift if we wrap it correctly, because now it was an opportunity.
This is something that I'll freely admit now listening to you, and I'm sure my listeners will say the same. You really struggle to get your head around because this is trauma in every sense. And in the process of describing this incident in 2018, you said, this story is fantastic, and finished it by saying, it gave me a gift. Those things just don't seem compatible.
It's whatever happens for you is because your life's going in a different direction. Now, would I turn around and say, would I want to happen again? Would I want to go through it? It was a really tough time of my life. I mean, going through depression, thoughts of suicide, why me? That's really where it all, we look at it, but then you realize I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't go through it. I wouldn't have the knowledge. I've trained 70,000 people to change their perspective in life. And the results have been incredible, from Olympic world record holders to someone 100 years old that just wants to walk again. It all starts with our mindset. But then how do we, I had to go and study the brain because again, I was a statistic. They like, take these drugs, do this stuff. Everything's, it's just what it is. And I'm like, hang on a minute. I need to understand the brain. So I became a brain specialist in rewiring the way we think, because our limitations don't come from us. They come from walls that are built by society to say, this is who you are. There's an analogy that I love. When we're conceived, the moment of conception, when the sperm, activates in the egg, there's an explosion of light. Now, from a biological point of view, they say that zinc being released to kill off all the other sperm that's around so we don't get more still trying to fight. It's one, that sperm's one. But we're impregnated with that light explosion and we're made to shine. The very first moment of light is an explosion of light. And slowly over time, we're told this is our limits, or don't do this, out of other people's fears or other people's expectations or other people's comfort zones. But if we really tap into who we are in the moment that umbilical cord was cut, look, Richard, when you were a baby, the doctor didn't look at you and say, okay, you ready? We're going to cut the umbilical cord. No, okay, we'll wait 5 minutes. You sure you're ready now? It's cut. And at that moment, we're, for the first time since conception, completely on our own. You say, well, there's doctors, isn't it? Yeah, but they're not in our system. And that baby grows up to be a young child, to become an athlete, to become this power force in their own mind of what they can envision from watching other people. And if we can do that as a baby, if we can do that with no help, why aren't we achieving more as adults in our chosen profession or in our sports? And if I could just add, I know I'm talking a lot, but if you look back to Roger Bannister and when he broke the 4-minute mile, do you know why people hadn't broken the 4-minute mile? And I'm not talking because we didn't know Kenyans at that time. I'm talking about, do you know why it was never recorded 4-minute mile?
I have no idea. He was the first to do it, obviously.
Yeah, and when we look back at the psychology of why had no one done it, scientists and doctors actually said that anybody running faster than a 4-minute mile would die because the body couldn't take in that much oxygen. We wouldn't have that VO2 max. Our lactic threshold wouldn't be able to cope with the buildup and the body would fail. And they've been saying this for years. So if you turn around and go, hang on a minute, why hadn't someone done it before? Was it because of the fear of success that it would end your life? So we get to a certain point, okay, I'm still safe, I'm suffering, I'm still safe, I'm suffering, I'm still safe. But when he broke it, people started breaking it. And now you can't qualify for a world championship if you can't, run under a 4-minute mile. People are doing it daily. Or I shouldn't say daily, but in races. What's the psychological impact that we're fed and bred compared to the truth of reality that dismisses our restrictions by someone else?
And this might be the most remarkable part of your story from my perspective, Dan, because you face this adversity, you pick yourself up, you get knocked down again. And I think for many people, it would be a struggle. You've spoken about depression, spoken about anxiety. These, for certain individuals, become insurmountable over time. And yet you've managed to turn your philosophy on life around to the extent that you, as you keep mentioning, you've got the Born Superhuman project. You're a keynote speaker. You speak with both business leaders and professional elite athletes alike. And I know from reading your literature, your philosophy is based on 7 pillars. So talk to us a little bit about those and how you relate them in order to develop success and potential.
Yeah, so I always start with the brain, even though the 7 pillars are set up in the order of importance. So the body is miraculous. We're born to heal. We're made to thrive. When we go through a challenge, that just makes us stronger. If I liken that to someone going to a gym, we have to stress the body to get success. There's positive stress and negative stress. And so when I look at the importance of the 7 pillars, it's in order of life itself. So number 1 is oxygen. However, we can change the way our emotional system and our fight or flight, the sympathetic or parasympathetic system functions by the way we breathe. And we don't learn to breathe. Most of us breathe in the upper respiratory system, which increases the body's feeling that it's under stress. And we know if you sit there and take deep breaths in and deep breaths out, we find a relaxation. So how can we bring that and the quality of air that we're breathing, so the system isn't having to constantly work on filtration to protect it, we can thrive. Number 2 for me is the most important. It's hydration. Most of us, I'll tell you, in America, they just came out with studies, 75% of people, adults in America, are in a chronic state of dehydration. When I was a head coach on the Olympic development program, we knew that 3% dehydration could be up to 20% underperformance. And we go, it's because the muscles aren't working. But the first thing that is affected by dehydration is our brain, because the brain consumes 25% of the water that we drink, and yet it only weighs 1 to 2% of our body weight. So by protecting the brain then can make the body function. And if you look at football, most goals are scored in the last 10 minutes of each half, or in overtime. We see it right now, in the Premier League, how many of the top teams are scoring late in the games. It's not just physical. It's how can we keep the focus through the final whistle how many times this season, I love watching the games, But we're 8 minutes into overtime. It's a tied game. And then one team goes, oh, we've got this. We're here. It's just a minute left. And the other team's going, we're going to score. And they score. And then all those 98 minutes of work have been given up because of 1 minute of mental collapse, not physical. So hydration is critical, more critical, I think, than anybody really understands. And I teach a specific way to be able to hydrate to maintain higher levels of performance, both mental and physical. Number 3, again, we all know it. There's nothing that I don't teach that people go, oh, wow, I never thought of that. It's just we know it and we ignore it. So number 3 is sleep. Sleep is so important because it's when the brain recovers. It's when the body is now healed through the night because it's not stressing itself, and the brain is able to prepare us for the next day. But we're not all the same. So you've got to sleep 8 hours. You've got to sleep 10 hours. We're all unique. And we have, some people are night owls. Some people are morning people. I'm a morning person. And so we can't make a night owl into a morning person. We have to look at how they're made up. And an athlete may need 10 and a half hours sleep. And someone that's relatively fit but has a different physiological and neurological makeup might only need 6 hours of sleep. But how do we get the quality and what time do we use? Next one, which people say is nutrition. Nutrition is so important for us, but people say, well, how can it be number 4? Because we are what we eat. Well, we are what we think, because what we think will determine whether we do it or not. But with eating, you can go 40 days without eating, but you can't go 40 days without water. You can't go 40 days without sleep. You can't go 40 days without oxygen, which is why it's there. But I'd love to give a little tip here. After I came back from my physical recovery, what do we do? When we're hungry, what do we do, Richard? I say, you're hungry. What are we going to do?
Go and find some food.
Yeah, we're going to eat, right? And so I was sitting at a 21.2% body fat. And obviously my BMI was very off from where I want to be as an athlete. I changed one word and it changed my life. And in America, the quality of food is really bad over here. I was coming back yesterday from speaking in Dallas, flying back into Los Angeles. I'm looking at the people and going, everyone looks so unhealthy. But it's not that they're trying to be, it's just what we're consuming isn't good. And we see it, in the quality of our skin, in the way, even our eyes, we look at it. But I did this one word that changed everything. Instead of eat, I changed the word to nourish. That was it. So instead of looking at I can say biscuits. I love saying biscuits over here. I say cookies, but crisps and cake and bread and all that stuff. I looked at that. I mean, that's not nourishing. And I started looking at fruit and vegetables and good meat and all the other stuff. I dropped, without changing anything else in my life, from a 21.2% body fat to an 8.2% body fat, just by that one word that changed my mental approach to what I was going to do. So when I work with athletes, when I work with high-end CEOs or someone that's got a dream, I look at it and say, okay, what's the mindset that you have that's a negotiable? Sometimes I'll do this, sometimes I won't, which takes us down, instead of this is non-negotiable. And again, when we go back to my brain injury, I learned how to rewire the brain, change the way we think, because the synapse, the way our neurons fire, are all relative to how we were educated and what we put in. When we can rewire by taking the subconscious to conscious and sticking with it until it becomes our new subconscious, the performance level and the impact on us in life is dynamic.
It's the power of having the right mindset, I guess, that turns it all around. That's not something, I think I'm not amiss in me saying, that's not something that's necessarily taught. It's something that evolves over time. And it's how do you manage to relate this to your clients, the athletes you work with, in order so that they undergo that evolution again to optimize performance and realize potential?
Yeah, great question. I reverse engineer. So what is it you want? And not what is it you want at the lowest level? What is the biggest dream? If you can't dream biggest, you won't go biggest. So if someone said, hey, I want to become a professional footballer, okay, that's great. Where? I want to play for, I'll say Barcelona because I don't want to be prejudiced with English teams. I go, okay, so what do you want to achieve at Barcelona? And they said, well, I'd like to become a star. That's not big enough. Let's go to the highest level of dream, because we'll never get there if we don't dream it. It doesn't mean say you're going to get there, but let's go, okay, what's the journey going back? Now, what's the sticking point when we get to where you are today? What's your thought process? What are the blocks? What are we changing? We need to reverse that. Now I'll go in and I'll realign the synapse, which are the messaging between the neurons that are firing in your brain. And I've done this. I've had so many players, and it's really sad for me because I had an elite sports performance training center in Los Angeles that Tottenham came out and looked at and were like, well, this is like our place, but on steroids. And some great stuff. But when we take people that are limited, or we have the synapse that are aligned wrong, it's actually very easy to change if you truly want that goal. Because I believe before every great breakthrough is a greater breakdown. And that's where people quit. That's why so few go there. And so if I can identify what your biggest dream is, and are you willing to do the work? Because the magic we seek is in the work we avoid. We know we should be doing it, but we find the excuses. And that's where, again, mindset has to become mind reset to become the new mindset. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it absolutely does. But it did make me think, as you were talking there, for all your experiences that you've been through to where we are right here, right now. You said quite obviously that you wouldn't necessarily want to go through the traumatic instances again. But do you look back on those experiences and think you're a better person for them now?
I'm smarter, I'm better, I'm stronger, I'm more determined. I've got a whole new mission and purpose in life, where I look at a lot of these athletes that have, had their career. They leave. In the old days, I'm a Chelsea fan personally. I was born blue because of my dad. And then I love Crystal Palace. I love Bournemouth, places that I've been. And I got respect for a lot of clubs out there as well. But I looked at those players back in the days of Davy Webb, where they retire and then they open a pub and then they get overweight and they don't have any purpose. They don't have the adoration of fame. They're living in the past. And you look at it with Wayne Rooney now. I'm just going to be honest, always. You look at it, he's let himself go. Even though he's coaching and in an environment, he's not fit, he's not healthy. I can't say he's happy the way he is knowing what he was. And that's because we often let go because we no longer have dreams forward. We have work forward. And I'm a big believer our best memories should still be ahead of us because we've got more wisdom and knowledge. But when we think everything's in the past, we tend to stop doing. Now, I'm not saying the pro athletes, they're tired. They've had a long career. They've worked really hard. But why stop when you've got so much to offer, when it's just not a lack of time, it's a lack of discipline of what we're doing with the time we have. And when we commit, we do get happier. I guarantee you, someone that was a top athlete that is no longer in shape isn't as happy as they were when they physically felt great. So when we can get our physical body in a better place or doing things that we feel we're getting better, we get excited. I was working with a gentleman called Willie Gault. You may know Willie Gault from the NFL. He was the wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. I know you'll know him from this. Carl Lewis, 4x100 meter, fastest team. He was the second leg of that. Brilliant guy. When he was 62, I was working with him, and he was still running an 11.1 100 meters at the age of 62.
It's not bad, is it?
If you looked at him, I never ran an 11 point at any age.
Me neither. Me neither.
On a bike, maybe. But if you saw him, he's still a perfect specimen of an athlete at 62 working with the Olympic team over here. And it's just decisions we make and the discipline that when I say I wouldn't go through it again, I thank God that I went through it, because I may be on the downward spiral if I hadn't realized how superhuman we all are to overcome and continue to excel.
Well, listen, Dan, it's a fascinating story. And it's a heck of a journey that you've been on personally as well. Unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but for our listeners out there that have been drawn in by some of the things that you've had to say on this particular episode, where can they find you and follow what lies ahead on social media?
Yeah, thanks. So go to bornsuperhuman.com, and then you'll find out what the last two pillars are, which is always great. And they are my most two powerful of all. You can also go to totalbalancecompany.com. That's totalbalancecompany.com. That's a brain training device that I use with multiple athletes, but it's all about physical work. And then on social media, I'd love for you to follow on Instagram, either Born Superhuman. You can look at Super Soccer Skills. That's a thing that I have specifically for young soccer players. And then Dan Metcalfe _official. But I really appreciate your time and everyone listening. It's been an honor. I've loved this.
No, it's been fantastic. And like I say, it's an absolutely fascinating journey you've been on. And in your own words, I'm quite sure the best still lies ahead.
Absolutely. If I can help anybody, that's the purpose of my life.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Many thanks to Dan for joining me on this week's episode, sharing with us his journey and his thoughts on mindset and how it can influence a person trying to optimize their performance. If you found some of the things he had to say interesting and want to find out more, then you can do so by visiting our website, www.scienceforsport.com. And if you've enjoyed this particular edition of the podcast, please do feel free to share it with a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. Remember, the more downloads we get, the easier it becomes for us to attract top-name athletes or peers at the cutting edge of their field. Well, that is just about all from me for this week's episode. Thanks once again for listening, and I look forward to the next time you can join me on the Science for Sport podcast.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.